So Season 18 does have a few loose story arcs. The first one being the E-Space trilogy, which is where the Doctor, Ramona, and K9 get trapped in an alternate universe called E-Space, and throughout that, that story arc, they're trying to find their way out of E-Space. And along the way, in the first story of that trilogy, Full Circle, they meet Adric, who secretly becomes like a companion of theirs. He sort of sneaked into the TARDIS at the very end of Full Circle and started becoming a companion of theirs, started in State of Decay, the next story in. And Adric's sort of known by a lot of the fans of Doctor Who as like one of the worst companions of the show, mostly due to his personality, and judging from all the Season 18 episodes that I've seen with Adric in it, I honestly don't blame him. And also, Tom Baker mentioned in an interview that he wasn't impressed that much by Matthew Waterhouse's acting. Matthew Waterhouse, by the way, was the actor who played Adric, and he thought Adric would have been better if he was like a more silent character who only nodded his head or shook his head, depending on what the Doctor tells him. But that didn't happen since John Nathan Turner wasn't a fan of that. And Warrior's Gate, which was the final story in the E-Space trilogy, Ramona and K9 decide to leave the TARDIS in order to help out a race of lion-looking people. I'm mostly trying to remember what their names were. Hold on, let me take a good look at that. The Tharls, that's what they're called. Okay, so the Tharls were, a species of lion-looking creatures that were enslaved by a different ship crew in that story, and Ramona decided to leave the Doctor, not go back to Gallifrey, and she and K9 decided to stay with the Thralls to help out, go into other planets to, save them from being enslaved. So afterwards, the Doctor and Adric would travel by themselves. So in the next story, Keeper of Traken, the Doctor and Adric were given a task by the Keeper of Traken to go to the planet to stop whatever evil's been going on. And basically a sort of a statue figure that was in Traken by the name of Melkur sort of all of a sudden out of nowhere talks and comes back to life and lies to some of the council members of Traken about some of the things relating to the planets and the fact that, his goal was to pretty much take over Traken. And it was later revealed at the very end of the story that Melkur was basically just the Master in disguise. Who the Master in this story is very similar in appearance to the Peter Pratt version. Instead, he was played by Jeffrey Beavers. And as soon as the Doctor, Adric, and Nyssa, who is a new character introduced in this story, they saved Traken, and the Doctor and Adric soon go back to the TARDIS. And however, near the very end, Tramas, who is Nyssa's father, goes to a mysterious clock, touches it, and then the Master, comes out of nowhere and gets into Tramas's body and sort of becomes the new incarnation of the Master, now played by Anthony Ainley. And this incarnation of the Master would later be the Master throughout the rest of the classic series from that point onward. And now we get on to the last story from Tom Baker's era, Logopolis, where the Doctor tries to save the universe from being unraveled thanks to the works of the Master. And along the way, he meets what was soon to be an Australian flight attendant by the name of Tegan, played by Jeanette Fielding, who mistakenly goes to the TARDIS thinking it was an actual police box, but then gets stuck with the Doctor and Adric as they get to Logopolis. And then Nyssa from Keeper of Traken appears looking for her father before realizing that her father was taken over by the Master. After stopping the Master's plans on unraveling the universe, the Doctor falls off of a telescope that he was hanging on to, around the time he officially stopped the Master's plan. And yes, he fell off, and then Adric, Nyssa, and Tegan then rushed over to see if the Doctor's okay. But then a mysterious character that appeared throughout the entirety of Logopolis appears by the name of the Watcher, who comes in and touches and merges with the Doctor, causing the Doctor to regenerate into the Fifth Doctor. So all in all, that was pretty much Tom Baker's era on Doctor Who in a nutshell. So, when it comes to other interesting facts relating to the Tom Baker era of the show, first things first, interestingly enough, unlike in the Jon Pertwee era where we didn't see these bad guys at all, in the final story of Season 12, Revenge of the Cybermen, yeah, I already kind of gave it away with the title. Yes, the Cybermen once again come back to Doctor Who in this one story from Tom Baker's era, so... And then afterwards, throughout the rest of the classic series, the Cybermen appeared at least once during each Doctor's era, so... They started becoming, as much of a recurring feature on Doctor Who as the Daleks and the Master were, so... Yeah, that's honestly pretty cool. And remember when I said earlier that, Philip Hinchcliffe's episodes of Doctor Who were a little more dark than, most of the other episodes from, before and afterwards? Well, apparently, one particular story, which I've already mentioned briefly before, The Deadly Assassin, was very controversial since in the cliffhanger for episode 3 of that story, Goth holds the Doctor's head underwater in an attempt to drown him. There was a campaigner who was, trying to, censor TV, or in her words, clean up TV, by the name of Mary Whitehouse, who said, oh, this is way too frightening for Doctor Who. Children who watch this show wouldn't know if the Doctor survived, blah, 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 blah. And unfortunately, that led to the episode, being edited later on to remove that original ending from episode 3. However, later DVD releases, VHS and DVD releases of The Deadly Assassin do include the uncensored version intact, so that's cool. So thank goodness for that. And as I've mentioned multiple times, well, not multiple times, just at the beginning of this episode, the Fourth Doctor was the most well-known incarnation of the Doctor throughout pretty much Doctor Who's history. And a lot of that would, of course, come thanks to the actor who played the Fourth Doctor, Tom Baker, who, honestly, in my opinion, did a pretty good job playing as the character. I love his eccentric, personality. His deep voice was really interesting. I honestly was not expecting, a deep voice from, a Doctor that pretty much, looked like this. I was not expecting that. And yeah, his voice, comparing it to, the previous 3 incarnations was definitely, pretty deeper, despite Tom Baker being a little more on the younger side compared to the previous 3 incarnations, so... Honestly, a lot of the Fourth Doctor's popularity is, of course, thanks to the guy himself, Tom Baker, so... yeah, I'll have to give a thank you to Tom Baker for playing such a really good incarnation of the Doctor. And it's not just the UK where the Fourth Doctor was pretty much well-known. He's arguably, the most well-known classic incarnation of the Doctor in the US. Since, at the time, in, the 70s and the 80s, Doctor Who episodes were being played on PBS here in the US. And... yeah, Tom Baker was, of course, the most well-known incarnation of the Doctor in the US, since his episodes were often the most played on PBS. However, they did play, other episodes from, throughout the rest of Classic Who, so it's not like the other Doctors didn't get their own share in the spotlight, but yeah, most people, of course, recognize this guy for being the Doctor here in good old USA. And of course, another well-known thing about Tom Baker, as you've probably seen from, images and, of course, the little figure I've been showing off every now and then, that would be his outfit. His hat, his coat, his trademark, big old scarf. It's, honestly, pretty iconic. Not something that I would expect from, somebody who travels throughout time and space, but it's really neat. And, throughout, most of his era, the outfit was, a little more, multicolored, it had, yellow, orange, gray, brown, and, yeah, pretty simple colors. However, in Season 18, John Nathan Turner decided to, change the Fourth Doctor's outfit to be more reddish and purple, and also they gave the Fourth Doctor, question mark, you know, a collar with, like, you know, question marks on it. And originally Nathan Turner wanted the designer of the outfits, June Hudson, to get rid of the scarf, but Hudson was like, no, I'm not getting rid of the scarf. It's like an iconic part of the character, so yeah. Everybody will, of course, recognize the Fourth Doctor for having his scarf and his hats, and yeah, really neat outfits. I really like it. And unfortunately, unlike Jon Pertwee, where I've seen all of the stories from his era, I have not seen every single Tom Baker story, which is kind of unfortunate, but I'm sure eventually, as time goes on, I will. The only seasons of his I have seen in its entirety, not his entirety, what am I talking about? The only seasons I've seen in their entirety would be season 12, which was his first season, and then I've also seen season 18, which was his final season in his entirety. And I know season 14, his third season, has been released on Blu-ray in the UK. I'm still waiting for it to come out in the US, so yeah, I'll eventually be able to watch that entire season in its entirety. So yeah, so I'm sorry if there isn't, like, you know, enough, you know, information about Tom Baker's era for me to talk about in full detail, since I haven't seen every single story, but yeah, hopefully that's fine with you guys. And if I'm not mistaken, you know, the footage that I've recorded so far for this story is probably the most I've recorded for any Doctor Who episode, so I think that means I'll have to split this into 2 parts, which is gonna be pretty weird, but yeah, we'll have to see how things go with that. And I think with all that rambling being said, I think that'll be about it for this episode of It Came From England. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it a like. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more episodes of It Came From England and just mediocre plush content in general. Leave a comment down below letting me know what you think. That's about it. This is Tyler from the Character Workshop, signing out. Next time, since this episode, like I said, is probably going to be a 2-parter, next episode I'll be talking about another BBC series, except a little more on the funny side, and starring Rowan Atkinson, who of course was well known for playing Mr. Bean.